The lesson here is to take two photographs, one for the background and also one for the foreground. In this case, I've chosen this photograph of rocks and beach, and then I've chosen this particular photograph of a shrimp boat stranded. And so what I'm going to do is join those two together into this particular watercolor. Now I'm using neutral tint, and so I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the background in neutral tint, light and middle value. Now it has to get a little darker when it's wet because it dries lighter, but it will dry as a light middle value. And I'm using vertical strokes to create a little bit more atmosphere to it and also design. And so I'm just going straight down like that, always going vertical and around the rocks and down through the beach. And the only thing that's going to be left is anything that I want it to be white, that's what I'm going to leave. Now if you want to, you could use a mascoid to paint over those white areas if that's what you wanted to save, and then you don't have to cut through them. But in this case, I think it was simple enough for me to cut around them. And so now after I got my middle value established there, I'm looking at it and I think it's a little bit boring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lighten it up by taking a damp brush and rubbing it down vertically. And maybe I could use a wet sponge. That would do very well too. And so I want to be able to go right through that cliff, just like I'm doing there, because I don't want it to stop on one side of the cliff. So I'm going to keep going until I get a sort of a pattern of interest in lights and darks, but not going really too dark in there, and then keep going down. Now you can see the white boat is starting to show up because the moisture is drying and it don't have the reflection from the light. Now my next step is sort of a jump, because the foreground middle value has been painted with a darker value, and also the cliff behind has been painted with a middle dark value. Then I'm taking a rigger brush mixed with a darker black, and I'm starting to draw calligraphy lines, not outlining, just getting some action in on the shape. And so there's a little bit of dry brush, there's a little bit of skipping over here and there, and it's just one of those things where it's up to the artist and what he feels. But if you went ahead and outlined the entire thing, that would be wrong. So please don't do that. Try to do what you see here. It's hard for me to tell you exactly how to do this. You've got to kind of feel it, but sharp strokes, hitting the mark and then not hitting the mark, it just all depends. Now there's a line that I want to connect that left side of the format with, and I'm squinting and I'm looking at this saying, okay, it's starting to be clearer to me. And so now I'm going to start putting some of this calligraphy into the rocks, like crevices and cracks, but not a completely outline of them. They're sort of laying on top. There's a net, fishing net, that comes across there, and so far I think everything is doing okay. You just got to get that excitement with that calligraphy line before you go on. Now notice that I'm not putting it on the real background, because I don't want our attention to go up there. Our attention is to have our detail and sharpness in the foreground, and our center of interest, which of course is the boat. The back of it has to be subordinate to this, and that's where you do that by keeping it in light values and no calligraphy on it whatsoever. And so now I'm drawing some guidelines and fishing lines and all that type of thing that's on this boat. Now after I get that done, I'm analyzing it and thinking, okay, now I'm going to go in with a little darker value, get it closer to the pen line, and then also tint the foreground, because the foreground is way too light, and go up here. Now when I put this down for the cliff, I'm putting shapes within that big shape, and it looks dark. It looks almost as dark as the rocks, and it can't be that. But it does dry lighter when after it dries, and I'm putting some water on it and sort of making sure that I didn't overstep that being real dark. There's nothing wrong with it being dark. It's just that this is the concept or the plan that I'm sticking with. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work on this foreground with these different values, put a little bit of dry brush on that white so it sort of looks like there's some texture on there. And then I'm going to start getting this foreground darker. Now look what happens when I did that. The boat really is starting to show up because of the whiteness of it. And I think that foreground could even be darker than that, but we'll see about it as I go. Okay, now I'm going to mix a little bit of darker. This is a natural tint that I'm, neutral tint rather, that I'm using. And it's a pure black. When it dries gray and black, not blue or anything like that, but it's a good paint to use. Good color to use rather for your black and white value studies. Now I'm going to make a line across from that boat, and then it comes up there. Maybe I should say ship. Now what you want to do is you want to start squinting at your work to see if you have what you wanted to accomplish. So I think I need a few more darker darks in the boat itself to accent that. Maybe paint in the windows a little bit more in the black. That would help. Make them just a little darker. When you paint rocks, you want to paint masses, just shape, not rock. And then put a couple lines in it for cracks, and it'll look like a rock. Okay, now as I'm analyzing it, as I'm looking at it, as well as you're looking at it, and I'm thinking, okay, now what else do I need to do? And I think the sky up there, I think I'm going to put a diagonal cloud mass coming up right up there. Now you notice that I don't have any white in the sky, and I don't want white in the sky because that'll take away from my boat. And so I tinted the entire paper, of course, with that light middle value in vertical strokes, and now I'm going opposite that for the sky. And I'm bringing it down just a little bit into the water. Well, I hope you enjoyed this this short video. I'd like you to do the value sketch before you come to class, if you're going to do this process or any other picture that you choose.